research ethics are essentially ensuring that in the process of carrying out your research, you don't do harm to other people.
The primary aim of it is to ensure that we are protecting participants who are taking their time, effort, potentially money to help us learn more about human behavior or engineering or whatever it might be.
So on one level, that's making sure you've got the consent forms and participant information sheets. That's one part of it, but also planning, making sure your participants are engaged in the planning of the project as well. So a various degree of stages that the research ethics process at the university tries to guide researchers through so that the research can go ahead and be as good as it can be.
Dealing ethically with research subjects means that research subjects are much more likely to deal with other researchers in the future. And then, of course, finally, there's the issue of ensuring the university itself isn't brought into disrepute by bad academic practice, mistreatment of research subjects, and the like.
There's something about the immediate thing that you do, the immediate impact of what you do. And maybe that's easier to think about, but then there's also the longer term impact of what you do, and you need to be aware of that stuff too.
So if we think of an example now, like a lot of people are talking about artificial intelligence, and in the past a lot of people talked about IVF, they talked about stem cell research, and they talked about genetically modified crops. And all of these things don't just impact researchers, they impact all of society, they impact people, they impact individuals, and they'll impact people who live in the world in the future. And it's about the kind of world we want to create.
We don't want people to say, oh, there's a burden there, I want to avoid engaging with it because I want to get on with what I want to do. They want to say, this is an opportunity to engage with it so that I can do the research that I do better.
I think people get quite anxious about it. They think it's going to be very complicated. And really we're just asking researchers to think about how they would want to be treated, really, if they were on the receiving end and being interviewed for, let's say, an oral history project. So if you're interviewing elderly people, think about how they might need to be treated, think about whether they might need more rest, think about how you mitigate any risks to your participants. And whatever you're doing with members of the public, think about preserving their data and looking and just treating people with respect.
I think just sort of my tip to anyone doing an application would be to be really thorough and to be a lot more thorough than you think you need to be. I think applicants need to remember that we are seeing such, a ton of applications from lots of different research areas, often ones that we don't have experience in, and some of the committee members are lay members, so they don't have research backgrounds. So I think, giving lots of detail, using lay language, assuming that we know nothing, will make for a much easier process for everyone involved.
Sometimes people get confused about these kind of ethics processes and stuff, thinking about there's some things I can't do and I shouldn't do. And often than not, it's not about restraining research, it's about doing that, but doing it well, okay? So having the right framework that you're able to ask those kind of questions, you're able to conduct that research, but the framework is there to help you do that ethically.
So that's the process within which researchers would submit something to a research ethics committee. They would review it and look at it and make sure that it complies with certain standards, and may ask them questions around the ethics of their research and the impact of what that could do. And then they would receive a favourable letter from the ethics committee, or they would receive something where it's oh, maybe you should think about this or change this. And that's a whole part of the process. And then the other side of research ethics is how we conduct research. So thinking of things like the transparency of the research we're conducting, the safety, the impact on society, whether that research should happen, why that research should happen, how it should happen, who's involved, how they're informed. Yeah, general, I guess, questions about all the research we're doing.
Going through the ethics process is a really nice way to have a critical lens on your own work. It gets you to think about questions that you might not normally think about. And actually, even some of the things that are tangential to ethics will come up. And it's really nice to find those things early on in the research process, because you don't want to be sort of making changes and correcting errors down the line when you spent time and resources and money and things like that.
We always find that research projects that are fully engaged with research ethics end up being better research projects.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's one of the most important things that you do in your research career. So.